Okay, so we ended the previous video on a point that the properties of a class are not protected by default, and in some cases this may be a less desired feature. For example, I don't think you should be able to update the ID of a to-do directly like this. So let's go and see what the modern JavaScript has in store for us, because there are some new features that allows us to create a private field somewhat similar to languages like Java. But of course it comes with its own caveats and its weirdnesses. So let's go and try to bring some of that to the table here. I'm going to start by working with the ID itself. So if I want the ID to be a private field, this is how I define it. I'll go here and I say hashtag ID. And so now it means that we have a ID property, and here I also need to update it to use hashtag ID, right? So what you need to be careful to understand here is that the hash character in front of it is actually part of the name. Like, the name of the field need to start like this so that it signals this is meant to be a private field, right? So anywhere you're going to be using the ID, you're going to be using it with like hashtag ID. That's how it works. So let's come here and run this code again and see what happens if I do node source to-do.js. So you're going to see some interesting stuff happening here. First of all, where I was printing out the to-do ID, I got undefined. And you might think, okay, this is probably the right behavior, right? Let me zoom in a little bit more for you. Okay. You might be thinking, all right, this is correct now because we don't want to be able to access the ID. Somehow it seems the line that I was assigning the ID still works. And it appears that when I print it out, it also prints out ID of 2. Let me actually print this out once before I go about accessing the elements and run this one more time. So notice that when you make a property private and then you go and you print out that object, that property does not appear among the attributes of that object. So this is the way the default behavior works. And so what happens when I'm trying to access to-do ID, or more importantly, when I'm going to set something here? The strange way that JavaScript works, well, it's strange when you're coming from languages like Java, is that you can technically add anything to to-do. Literally anything, like any set of property. And like I can go here and say last name, put my last name here, and refresh this and run this again, and all of a sudden there's a last name here with my last name. So I find that a less desirable feature, but I don't know, maybe to some people this is how a language should work. You can basically attach any attribute at any point to an object, and it's just going to go about its life and it will accept it. So what we are really trying to do, like if we wanted to showcase that, hey, this is a private attribute, there are two places that you can see that behavior. One is when you just print out to-do after construction, you don't find an ID or a hashtag ID attribute in here. The other is that if I were to actually try to access it, and remember, it's not really ID anymore, it has this prefix in it, and that's part of the name of the variable. Then you would sort of, I mean, depending on your editor, you may get it highlighted right there that tells you that, you know, this is private and you're not supposed to work with it. And more so, if you actually go and run it, then your code will crash too. It will give you a runtime error saying that you're trying to like access a private field. Okay. So is this a good thing now, or is this more confusing that because somebody can go and still like add an ID to it and work with it? Well, I don't know. There are other things that we can do with this though. So if, let's say now you had the desire to actually get the ID and print it out, well, you can do something similar to Java, which is like create setters and getters for the private attribute. So we can do get ID, right? And we'll go and just return this dot hashtag ID. Right, and let me comment all of this other stuff out so you can just see what's happening here. Get ID. Right, let's go maybe zoom out a little and run this code. So we got the ID. The ID is 1, and that's correct. JavaScript has a special syntax for getters and setters, and so we can make this look perhaps a little better. So I suppose the argument is, maybe you created this and you want to say this is private, but when you want to access it, you want to actually access it with like plain ID without the hashtag. And here's how you do it. You put a space here. So get is a special keyword that helps you to create a getter operation. And you can give this whatever name you want, but let's go with ID, with a small letter ID, and I'll show you why that might be interesting, because then I can do to do ID and not use it like a function. So I'm not putting parentheses in front of it. I'm using it as if it is a property, right? And if I run it, it prints out the value, right? But if I wanted to go and like set this to something like 20, well, if I wanted to set it with the hashtag, it would not work. And if I wanted to set it without the hashtag, it's not going to give me an error in the editor, right? But you can see that like when you write it like this, under the hood, JavaScript is saying basically this is what you're doing. Something like that. Like you're calling the, or maybe like this, like you're calling the ID operation. And it doesn't make sense if you go and try to like assign something to it, right? So this now kind of like it stops what we had before, where you could have the hashtag ID and you could still set the ID and see the value of ID. And if you really wanted to allow somebody to set the ID, there is, I suppose you can just not make it private, but maybe you want to design it in a way that somebody can, just for the sake of like example, let's say we want to allow somebody to set the ID. So let's say set ID. And then here you can say, let's give it like a new value. And then you can go here and be like, this hashtag ID is this value. And why this might be useful, like this is exactly the same as if we would make this private, but hey, maybe you do some control, like maybe IDs should never be negative. So you can say if value is less than equal to 0, then like throw new error, give it a message, something like that, right? So let's go and now try to run the code again. So now this, I deleted the line that I had. So let's say todo.id and give it like 20. And then let's go like print it out again. So now you see, and again, you can set it as if you're directly dealing with a property, right? So let's kind of grasp what happened. Like if you look at just this part of the code, it seems like I have an ID attribute, and that attribute is as if it's public. I can just access it, read it, or I can just use it to assign a new value to it. But if you look at the actual implementation, you realize that I have some level of information hiding that allows me to perhaps, like when I want to return it, to do some formatting here. So convert it from how I'm internally representing it rather to how it's being presented to the client. And also maybe do some validation when somebody wants to set that value, right? So that's the benefit of doing something like this. Now on that point, let's go and have fun with the other attributes. Let's like make all of these private text, and let's have the completed as well. And let's go and put this hashtag next to all of these. And what I will do is, the toggle is good. I want to use it, but I don't want a setter. So after you like gave me the ID during the construction, I don't want you to be able to do something like this, but I still let you access it. So that's the point. And on that point, I don't want you to be able to update the text directly or update the completed directly, but I do let you to like access them. I want to let you to kind of like just be able to directly access those attributes. So I'll put a bunch of getters here for them. Right. So let's put like text. And let's return text, and let's put completed, and let's return completed, right? Okay. So now let's go and like write this. So you see I can access all of these, but if I wanted to like use any of them directly, like if I wanted to do to completed true, this is not going to run. Right, it's going to break down. So if I actually want to flip it, I have to do toggle and then look at the value of to do. Right, so it was false, I toggled it, and now it is true. Okay, so this really comes down to a design decision, right? It's a question of what seems reasonable to you in terms of information hiding. And again, this isn't at the same level of access that you have in terms of the visibility of operations or the fields in a language like Java, but it's something.